Now, about 3 months ago, Nigeria took a decision to restrict cross-border movement with, of course, some of her neighboring Ecowas member countries. Now, specifically targeted are the Western Corridor between Nigeria, Benin Republic, the northern fringes between Nigeria, Niger, and, of course, at the southeastern Cameroon. Now, that decision is probably one of the much publicly talked about issue now, and the talks are centered on the prompt for the closure, convenience or impact, especially for Nigeria. But the most critical issue about the move, which is of great concern to economic experts, is the place of the action within the protocol relating to free movement of goods and persons, and also, as a writer puts it, the newly minted African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Now, at the moment, no one knows for certain when the restriction will be relaxed. What we do know now, however, is that Nigeria, through the Minister of Foreign Affairs, has given conditions before reopening the border. Now, there have been media reports about the impact on prices of commodities and, of course, the livelihood of citizens of neighboring ECOWAS member countries affected by the closure. Now, whether the closure of the borders has impacted positively on Nigeria will depend, of course, on the divide that you're in. So those who have attempted at evaluating impact so far say it's visible, but at the micro level. However, there are cries over hiking prices of commodities, and they blame the rising cost of price, for instance, on the border closures. Today on Late Edition, we examine the issues of border closure within the context of existing regional trade agreements among West African countries. I am Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak. Thank you for joining me. Now, Dr. Ken Ukoha is a lawyer, he is a businessman, and a ground trader. That's how I call him. And you will soon find out why. He has a degree in business administration from the Ladoke Akintola University. He has, of course, obtained law at the University of Ibadan. He is also an alumnus of the International Academy for Leadership. Dr. Ukoha has expertise in international trade and economic law. He has been mediating in, of course, bilateral, and regional trade agreements, and, of course, has been instrumental in resolving issues involving Nigerian traders in the diaspora and their host communities, especially the eviction of Nigerian traders in Ghana. He has been in the vanguard of negotiations for various trade agreements, such as EPA, ECOWAS, and most recently, African Continental Free Trade Agreement. He is a consultant to ECOWAS Commission on Trade Customs and Legal Issues. Dr. Ukoha is serving on the of course, as member of ECOWAS Task Force on ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, ETLS, and the Protocol on Free Movement. He chairs the West African non-state actors on the ACFTA and is the serving president of the National Association of Nigerian Traders, NONS. My second guest, Professor Dagachi Eliu Mambe, is of the Department of Sociology, University of Abuja, and is, of course, someone I call a thorough homegrown, having obtained all his educational qualification here at home. He has BSc Sociology from the Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, MSc Sociology, and PhD Sociology, and of course, Sociology and Criminology from the University of Ilorin. His area of competence is basically terrorism and insurgency, and is also a director, Institute for Legislative Studies at the University of Abuja. Please join me as I welcome the two gentlemen to Late Edition this week. Dr. Ukoha, thank you very much for joining me. Professor Mambe, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Let me quickly begin with Dr. Ukoha. Is the substructure of the ECOWAS collapsing? Give us a sense of what exactly is happening at the moment with regional integration model.
Thank you very much, Claire. I don't think the structure is collapsing. Nothing is collapsing. And this is exactly what happens to every regional integration. You know, that there's always that fit to survive. And there's always some level of dispute, if you like. And that for every dispute, there must be settlement as well. And then in every family, there must be some kind of, you know, disagreements sometimes. And then sometimes you can also see discipline coming up as a result of such disagreements. And if you like, sanctions. And beyond the sanctions, you can also see where the people come together in a dialogue system to renegotiate and to agree and to move forward.
Is there a precedent for this action? Maybe even with other regional, you know, integration models?
You may not be looking for precedents, but again, if you look at the European Union, where we copied our, you know, Ecowas model from, you see that those things have happened over 40, 50 years back. And, you know, with France and Germany, I mean, you see with you know, some of the Eastern European countries that had some problems. It's a teething problem. And then you get across them. And don't forget that we are rolling into a kind of model which we call the custom union. And so for you to move into a full custom union, these are things that are teething problems that you must pass through and then get to where you want to get to. And this is called a Dorado.
Okay. Professor Mambe, what do you see happening? You know, just give us a panoramic, you know, view of what you think is happening to the ECOWAS model at the moment.
This is a very unique opportunity to Nigeria and the ECOWAS community, because we are long overdue to have reached certain level of economic and political development. And for long, we have been searching for a way forward. And part of the way forward to resolve our contradictions is the idea of coming up with this border closure. And we felt that it is part of a step forward to put Nigeria in a proper place of political and economic development.
All right. So, Dr. Ukoha, I'm coming back to you again to, you know, because we hear a lot of things. We hear some people say, okay, this is a temporary closure, partial closure, you know, and all that. And we actually hear people talk about the fact that the closure has prevented, you know, cross-border movement. It has shut down cross-border movement. What is happening? Is there a total shutdown of cross-border movement?
All right. You must permit me to say this caveat and place it on the table. I am, quite right, a member of the ECOWAS Heads of States Task Force, 7-man task force on trade and free movement protocol. But I'm not going to speak at that level now. The reason why I'm not going to speak is because we just concluded 3 members of the panel, which I am a member of, just concluded a verification and fact-finding mission in the 3 countries involved, namely Nigeria, Niger Republic, and Benin Republic. And I just came back the voice today. And so there are a lot of fine things that I would not be permitted to talk about here. But let me say this, that I have personally visited the borders. I have realized that there is a partial closure, yes. Partial closure in the sense that some genuine goods are still allowed movement. 2, human beings, individuals, persons, are also allowed, provided they have genuine means of identification, namely your ECOWAS international passport. And of course, everybody knows that the 15 member countries of ECOWAS now has one single passport.
Precisely.
All right, so once you have that, you are good to go. Or any form of identification that is a national one. And Ecowas, do not forget, is moving towards a biometric identification now. So once you have that, you can move. But
when you talk about a national form of identification other than the ECOWAS passport, how do you mean? Like you have our national
yes,
identity
for instance,
card?
you're a Nigerian and you have national identity card, you can go. You're allowed to go.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but for me, whether it is partial or, semi-closure, closure is closure. The border is closed. My worry is about goods of West African origin, and we call it in trade originating goods, that are packed at the borders. In fact, you will see over 2,000 trucks of goods. If you look at semi-border, for instance, semi-Krake border, if you're moving from the Cotonou axis, there is an Atlas park. In fact, those containers, those trucks have been moved now to Atlas Park. They are by the left-hand side. If you're coming from Cotonou, there are over 1,500 trucks.
Why are those trucks parked? Is it that they do not have, the genuine forms of, identification that would enable them to pass?
No, because the border is closed by Nigeria. Final full stop. Now, if you're coming from the other end, and I'm coming to, I know where you're heading to. If you're coming from Lagos to semi-border, there are over 1,000 trucks on the line. Now, they are on the line because there is no park at that end. And if you get to the border, because there's just a joint border there, there's also a park there, you get over 1,000 other trucks. And when I'm talking about these trucks, they are laden with goods. Goods. But I think the first thing that we should be asking is Nigeria right in taking this decision?
We'll come to that. We're just taking it step by step.
Beautiful.
Because why I'm allowing Prof to relax a bit, it's because you somehow, you are the center of it all. You are kind of in the middle of these negotiations, so you know exactly what happened. And of course, you are a Nigerian, first and foremost. So we'd like to, those of us who haven't been, to the border, we just like to understand, because I've seen media reports, I've seen, documentaries done recently about the situation, especially at the Nigerian, Benin border, of what is going on and all that. Is the border closed and open at specific times?
Now, the borders are open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
What happens within that time?
Within that time, once you have, like I said, your genuine means of identification, you can cross. Passengers are moving, are allowed. But, the traffic is not the way you used to have it before the closure of the border, which took place on the 20th of August 2019.
Okay. Let me have you. Professor Degochi, from your experience,
yes,
Nigeria has been a big brother,
yes,
not just to her neighboring countries, but also to other members on the African continent.
Absolutely.
Nigeria has been signatory. In fact, Nigeria was at the forefront of ECOWAS formation.
Yes.
The protocol on free movement, has been, reversed time and time again. And Nigeria, has been, of course, the driver of this protocol.
Absolutely.
Don't you think that this was a thoroughly thought out decision for Nigeria?
I've said it at the beginning of our discussion that it is high time for Nigeria to get to a certain level of social, economic, and political level in terms of development and growth. We have long anticipated our level of stability, and it has become a very worrisome issue, not only to political leaders, but even to the global community, that Nigeria is supposed to have been one of the leading economies of the world. We have been blessed with human and material resources. But unfortunately, if you are asked to summarize our problem as a nation, the summary of our problem as a nation is just attitude or attitudinal problem. With all these resources, human and natural capital, we are yet to get it right. And most of the nations of the world have been doing extremely well.
Whose fault?
So it is our fault, both the followership and the leadership. So we must be able to stick to a specific policy of stabilizing ourselves, putting ourselves on the right track to achieve a global stability.
How do we marry these challenges now, with the recent development, at the border, closing down our borders, and of course our place within, the Ecowas?
Yes, every policy has its own limitations, positivities and negativities. We believe that there can be a perfect system or a perfect policy. Part of the shortcomings of the policy is probably the issues of the hardship and some of the issues of high rising in the prices of goods and what have you. But then it is a way of repositioning our economy to be self-reliant, self-dependent, and seeing that we can do it on our own. We can't continue for years remaining a dependent nation.
Are you implying that our neighbors probably have a hand, in our challenges, in our issues?
We have been doing extremely well to other nations of our brothers and what have you. But you can see our problems continue to linger for too long. And it's so unfortunate on our side as a nation where we have a numerous intellectuals, we have numerous number of skillful and professionals all over the world. But I've said it elsewhere that our major problem is attitude. We must generate a positive attitude towards everything, even towards our nationalism. And in the process, we must be able to have a specific standard of doing things. And that is part of it today we are having.
Okay. Dr. Okoha, the spokesman of the Nigeria Customs just recently explained that the border was closed because of, and I'm quoting him, rampant flagrant abuse of officially established ECOWAS protocols by some neighboring countries, and also to stimulate economic activities in the country. Can you speak more on the abuse?
I think if you ask me as a Nigerian, I think I would rather agree with the spokesman of Nigerian Customs. He spoke the minds of many Nigerians. And just to veer off a bit and, take it off from where Prof, stopped, we've been playing this for the Christmasism for a long time. And we've been taken for granted as a country. And I must say at this point that kudos must be given to this present administration. In fact, to the president for standing up. He is the first to stand up on this matter, to take it up squarely, to stand to say, look, you either bend or you break. Why am I saying this? We've had litany of agreements between Nigeria and neighbors. Specifically, and I give you some instances, specifically on the 11th of April 2005, there was an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, on these trade issues and the matters that we are seeing right now between the then Nigerian President, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, and Matthew Kreku of Benin Republic. What happened thereafter? That MOU, the commitments thereof, nothing was implemented. On the 2nd of May 2014, Nigeria had an agreement with Niger Republic government. And before that date, the Nigerian authorities cried out that, look, we don't have the capacity in terms of mobility to enforce the agreements. You know what Nigeria did? Nigeria provided 10 Hilux trucks to Niger to implement stricter sense the contents of that agreement. Did anything happen? Was the agreement implemented? The answer again is no. On 22nd to 23rd of July 2015, there was a bilateral meeting between Nigerian Customs Service and Republic of Benin Customs Service. Again, these people cried out and said, look, we do not have capacity. The reason why we did not implement the 2005 agreement was because we don't have the capacity. We need A, B, C, D. Again, Nigeria has Big Brother and Father Christmas in that spirit, provided another 5 Nissan vehicles. Did that lead to implementation? The answer again, you can guess. No. Now, again on the 4th of August 2015, Nigeria went back again and said, look, we've been traumatized over this matter. Can't you guard your borders? Can't you please look at your senior brother is weeping, is crying. Can you please implement the contents, the details of the agreement? So that, and I would not say that Nigeria was asking for so much. All that Nigeria wanted was, come on, the goods that were coming in from Benin Republic into Nigeria, Nigeria has what is called list of prohibited items. It was about 48 then now to 26 of them. Look at this list. We do not want them in our markets. They are distorting our local produce.
So Nigeria complied with the article, I think it's Article 7, Chapter 7?
I'm coming to that, which is Ecowas.
Ecowas, yes.
Protocol. Now, again, in that regard, the implementation was zero. In that same 2015, Nigeria went again and had this same meeting. They brought up the previous agreement, cleaned it up, did some, yet nothing happened. In 2016, it happened again. On the 4th of August 2016, another MOU came up. It was like giving a long group, looking at how this thing can happen in a diplomatic manner. And then, between the two customs on that date, everybody clapped, thinking that something would happen.
Dr. Ken, sorry to interject.
Yes,
the PRO of Ghana Union Traders Association,
yes.
I think one Joseph Paddy,
granted
CNBC an interview recently. And he cried out and accused Nigeria he said Ghana was not in the know, and accused Nigeria of not complying with that article. So from all that you have said, Nigeria complied with the Article 7 of the Ecowas Protocol.
Now, the problem that Nigeria, and this is one thing that I think people in government would need to understand. Yes, a lot of people have accused Nigeria of taking up a unilateral action by closing the borders. If you ask me as a lawyer, as a trade lawyer, would that be correct? And I would say yes. Why would I say yes? There are some conditions placed out in the protocol, the Ecowas protocol. For you to close your border, for you to, in fact, list out any measure, we call it safeguard or retaliation, whatsoever, there must be a system, a kind of complaint mechanism. That's one. Number two, what Nigeria has been complying with is a bilateral agreement between Nigeria and Benin Republic, or Nigeria and Niger Republic.
Okay, let me hold you.
Yes, please.
Let me put you on hold,
Yes.
Dr. Ken Ukoha, and bring in Prof, because Prof is an expert in, he has expertise in terrorism and insurgency. You've listened to Dr. Ken. You've listened to a number of times Nigeria had approached, whether it's on a bilateral level.
Yes.
What we do know is that Nigeria had complied with a particular article of the Ecowas protocol, which says that if you have any issue, you must let your member countries, you must inform them.
Certainly.
Yes. So, what would you have expected Nigeria to do in that instance? Would Nigeria still fold their arms?
No.
Because maybe other...
No, we have exhibited the giant of Africa in every ramification in terms of our consistency in ensuring our unity, our progress as a continent. We have played, Nigeria has consistently played that role. But there must be a kind of a stage in which we must ensure that certain things need to be done in form of integrity, in protecting our dignity and our name as the giant of Africa. The Father Christmas role, which we have been playing, has succeeded in pulling us back as a continent. Of course, in the recent time, we had the issue of xenophobia in South Africa. We have played a very fundamental role in everything that brings South Africa to where they are today. But what we are getting as a payback is always a kind of a very terrible and very negative reactions of consequences of our generosity. And I believe everything we have currently by this administration in terms of this border closure is a good intention of promoting our prosperity to a better and a greater height as a continent. We cannot continue to remain as the poverty capital of the world. We cannot continue to consistently failing on issues that are very, very surmountable. The issues of our growth.
Yes, but you heard Dr. Okoha say
yes.
There are steps provided by the protocol,
yes.
Ecowas protocol.
Yes, which were part of the membership.
Yes, which Nigeria did not follow.
No, I can't agree on that, because Nigeria has been a nation that has consistently remained a very obedient to international laws and international issues. We have continued to exercise a kind of a great nation that has continued to accommodate all kinds of challenges all over the world. So there is no any area that we can accuse ourselves or accuse Nigeria of not complying with the ECOWAS policies and instruments. Every policy that has been put in place by the ECOWAS, which Nigerian nation is also part of it, has been complied with. And I believe this is a step in the right direction.
Okay, Dr. Ken, informal cross-border trade has been an integral part of our lives, especially among West Africans. You move from place to place, and it has indeed promoted trade. But with the case of Nigeria, it's more of, the trade has been more of an informal one, especially along the western border, that's between Nigeria and Benin Republic. How has the informal trade between our neighbors affected our economy?
All right, thank you very much. A major chunk of the informal, of trade that, takes place between Nigeria and Benin Republic is informal. And I can tell you, if you want to get that, it's about 87%, which is quite large. The same thing applies to Niger Republic and Nigeria. In fact, that one is even higher, to the point that you have almost about 98.3% informal trade, because major chunk of people around that axis do not engage in documentations. Okay, that's right. But let me get back to a bit, if you permit me, to this particular issue of whether Nigeria has, contravened any law. In my mind, I am not saying that Nigeria has contravened, given the scenario. Given that Nigeria has 1, 2, 3, 4 instances of bilateral agreements that failed on the other, at the other ends. However, if you take a look at Article 76 of the Ecowas Treaty and read that with Article 6 of the Supplementary Act on the Rules of Origin of Ecowas. Now, what it would tell you is this, that for you to trigger such a safeguard or a retaliation, you must refer to Ecowas. Now, why did the crafters of this particular treaty put it that way? In international law, once you have signed an agreement, an international agreement of this magnitude, what you have done is to relinquish part of your sovereignty to a supranational entity. Now, that supranational entity in this case is ECOWAS. And the commission there represents ECOWAS member states, the 50 member states.
Does ECOWAS support member countries that have entry port status, like Benin?
Entry port?
Yes, where you have, for instance, all the goods they have, are imported from outside the country, and then they push it.
No, that's another
does
ECOWAS
support that?
That's another kettle of tea. What we are saying about, what we're talking about here is that, look, ECOWAS, for you to trigger this, get your report to ECOWAS. And I can also refer you again to regulation C4 and C6/06/4/13 of safeguard mechanisms of ECOWAS. Member countries, the 50 member countries signed all of this. So it's not good for you to sign and then, approbate and reprobate at the same time.
Dr. Ken Ukoha, let me pause you. You continue with your line of thought.
Yes.
We'll just, Professor Mambe, we'll just take a short break. This is a very interesting discussion we're having. We're looking at of course, border closure by Nigeria and matters arising. And of course, within the context of the regional instruments like ECOWAS and African Continental Free Trade Agreement that Nigeria, of course, recently signed. This is Late Edition. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Late Edition. This week, we're looking at border closure within the context of ECOWAS and African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I have Dr. Ken Ukoha, President, National Association of Nigerian Traders. Dr. Ukoha, thank you very much for joining me.
You.
I also have Professor Dagachi Mambe, Professor of Sociology Department, University of Abuja. Prof, thank you very much for joining me. Just before we went on break, Dr. Ukoha, you were talking about, of course, the various articles within the ECOWAS Treaty and the supplementary ones, of course, that you need to of course, member countries need to invoke where you have issues. And I'm asking, and I'm wondering, when Nigeria was meeting with all the member countries and, of course, presenting her issues to these countries, where was ECOWAS? Was ECOWAS sleeping?
Thank you very much. That's the right question. But a wrong model. Now, why do I say this? Nigeria engaged with these two countries on bilateral, one-on-one, if you understand this, level. It's like brotherly meeting. And then at the end of the day, you have an agreement. But I think what was missing is that Nigeria...
But ECOWAS also recognized that.
Just hang on. What was missing is that Nigeria would have deposited the instrument of this agreement with ECOWAS officially. So that would have signaled that, your intention and given ECOWAS the latitude to operate. So that is the missing link there. In any of these agreements, none of them were deposited. That's one. But am I saying that Nigeria was wrong in invoking what it has invoked? No. You know why? This is where we now need to go back to the provisions. If your boundaries, if your, corridors are being affected in terms of insecurity, you can trigger this.
Exactly.
The point now is, and this is the first point I expected Nigeria to be, flashing, not the issue of rice, the issue of, these commodities coming in. These are secondary. The most important, the primary one, which the treaty recognizes, is insecurity.
But indeed, hold it. I know you are eager. He is a professor of, sociology and criminology. Prof,
yes.
Unrestricted and unregulated cross-border, movement.
Yes.
How might that make a receiving country's territorial integrity and economic capacity vulnerable? Is Nigeria's security vulnerable as a result?
You can see over the years, the development and the growth of this great nation, Nigeria, has been retarded largely on the issue of insecurity. Tracing back to the emergence of a deadly group called Boko Haram. You can also recall very vividly that these ECOWAS nations, our neighboring countries that have made Nigeria a dumping ground, and by the virtue of the porosity of our border, the issues of our stability as a nation in terms of economy has been greatly hampered by these challenges of violent attacks, largely as a result of lack of a specific restriction in the movement of goods and services. Honestly, there is no any nation in the world that will ever establish or will ever enjoy the issue of stability when there is no restriction in the movement of goods and persons into that nation. It has never been in the history of the world. So the idea of Nigeria coming up with a policy of closure of the land borders is germane, is very fundamental. It's an issue that is very, very topical, and we must not joke with it. If we really want to achieve greatness within the global system.
Dr. Koha, you were going to talk about the issue of security. That Nigeria did not deposit the MOUs and all the agreements, at the ECOWAS Commission or Secretariat, and went ahead to invoke this. Does it mean that we have isolated ourselves?
No, it does not mean we have isolated ourselves. But I think where we have a case, a very strong one for that matter, is that, one, everybody knows the insecurity that Nigeria is facing. Banditry, kidnapping. In fact, many of these countries, almost all of them, have their embassies or high commissions here in Nigeria. So they see it, they have their reports on regular basis. So it is very clear Now, if you also move from there, you see other forms of criminality. For instance, the Niger axis has become the tunnel for human trafficking to Libya, to Morocco. That's the axis. Very, very notorious. Okay, across the desert and then to the Mediterranean Sea. Now, if you also look at the issue of drug peddling, which has become a big issue now, and in fact, people need to be talking about this. I have a lot of statistics that I can drop here that will be mind-boggling. And this is a case.
Yes, indeed. The ECOWAS PRO did mention, the arrest of a number of irregular migrants in their hundreds, live cartridges, hard drugs, quite a number of them. In fact, he mentioned, mind-boggling numbers, since the border closure. So this supports, the Nigeria's action. Exactly
what I'm saying. When we started, I did tell you clearly that for me as a person, I fully and totally support this. And that this is the first time Nigeria is rising up as a nation. And I gave kudos to the president for doing this, for standing, because it's not easy. There must be a lot of pressures from other, heads of states, presidents talking to him about, because let's get it right. It is not only Niger and Benin that are affected by this.
Yes.
There are goods coming in from Ghana. I'm sure you've heard.
Yes.
Ghanaian authorities, the ministers have come here 2 or 3 times over this matter. From Burkina Faso, we have received reports in our panel. We have received from Togo, we have received from Cote d'Ivoire, and more are coming. But the point is this: as a Nigerian, we should be asking ourselves, when it comes to crisis in Liberia, it is Nigeria that will go and spill the blood, and our soldiers will die there. When it comes to Sierra Leone, the same Nigeria will go and then solve their problem. When it comes to Gambia, removal of Jammeh, it is Nigeria that will spearhead the whole thing. When it comes to Mali, it is Nigeria. When it comes to Cote d'Ivoire, it is Nigeria. Wherever it is, even beyond the shores of Ecowas to Congo and all of that, Nigeria will be the one that UN will call. But when it comes to economy, we are the one that will be the whipping baby. So we need to look beyond this.
Now that you have pointed out the gap in Nigeria's action, how are affected countries reacting to that?
They are reacting very, very terribly about it. They are weeping because, the goods under ETLS, for instance, that are duty-free, that should have no kind of impediment in crossing the border into Nigeria. Now most of them are at the border side. In fact, some of these things, almost about 77% of the ETLS goods at the border as we speak now are perishable items. We saw kola nuts that have been there since August 20th when the border was closed. We saw a lot of vegetables. We saw coconut. We saw these things are no longer consumable. And my own worry also goes to the traders, because there are also Nigerians who go to those countries to buy these things and bring in. What's the fate? It has an implication, a very serious one for that matter, for the economy of Nigeria, not only for those countries. Now, factories like Cadbury have been whipping. They are almost shutting down one part of their factory. Why? Because they get raw materials from Ghana, cocoa. And that line can no longer produce. You see the implications for employment? So there are implications. We may not have time. I will tell you one by one how it will affect. However, the entire thing is this. ECOWAS has come up now to bring up a solution.
Yes, but even before the solution, Nigeria, through the Minister of Foreign Affairs, came out with conditions.
Conditions, correct.
Yes. Could you enlighten us?
All right.
Yes.
Now let's look at the conditions. And I think I buy into those conditions. Absolutely. Stricto sensu. 1, ECOWAS must assist and facilitate And that's why I love the way he put it. It is ECOWAS' responsibility, not those countries. Because if we are looking at them, you go again and enter into an MOU that would be a paper at the end of the day, kept on the shelves, and it will not work. First of all, the strict implementation of the free movement protocol in terms of movement of goods, originating goods, goods under the ETLS, what are they? That's one. Two is the SIGMAT, what we call SIGMAT in ECOWAS. And one of the provisions is that for goods that are landed in member country, for instance, in Benin Republic and their port in Cotonou there, if there is a container that lands there and is cleared by the owner and is moving it to Nigeria, the law, the ECOWAS protocol provides that the customs of Benin Republic must escort that particular container as sealed as it is, move it to the corridor, and to the border of the receiving destination country, which is Nigeria, and then hand over as it is to the customs of Nigeria.
Okay.
But this has not been obeyed. This has rather been continuously obeyed in breach. You know why? One, they will break the seal over there in Cotonou. Two, they will now begin to transload. And in the process of transloading, many other things come in.
Yes.
A declared good, because once the good is coming, there is a declaration there. So you don't find the manifest, you don't find the clear declaration in the manifest again. It becomes another thing entirely. And then that's where both stealing, pilfering, and then smuggling, the grandfather, comes in.
Professor Mambe,
Yeah.
the sociology of people, when
Yeah.
people begin to, bonded by an agreement,
Yes.
begin to comply with the agreement in the breach.
Yes.
Is it an indicative that that agreement there's a gap in the agreement and needs to be reviewed?
Certainly. If you look at virtually all the MOUs, the international agreements and all that, it has had several pitfalls in terms of compliance and what have you. And each nation is supposed to go back to the drawing board and look at those treaties, agreements, and laws to see whether they are suitable, that will really promote the interests of their member communities and what have you. You can't just dogmatically continue to comply to rules that are repugnant or they are contradictory to your interest. We have had it severally, as he said. All those rules and laws and what have you are not really in tandem with our genuine interests as a nation.
Is ECOWAS treaty repugnant now?
No, some of those policies have been long violated. And he has said it all, that virtually all the member nations and even some of the countries within the African continent have been our major concern. We are always worried as a nation because we are a giant of Africa, trying to see that we continue to protect their socio-political interests. But nobody is protecting ours. Okay. So we can't continue to remain focusless and clueless about where we are supposed to be as a nation based on the global desires and competitiveness. We must reposition our thinking, redirect our criticalities, and look at where we are going and be able to assess and reassess our success points and all that.
Dr. Kenukoha, is it indicative of a gap in the protocol, in the ECOWAS treaty, and is there a need for review?
Now, just about a year or so ago, I did a consultancy. I was privileged to consult for ECOWAS for a review of the ECOWAS laws. And I did that review, and one recurring decimal that I saw is the absence of sanction mechanisms in many of the protocols as well as the treaty. And in every society where you have what you call a law that does not have a teeth to bite when disobeyed. In every family where the father and the mother only talks, but they don't have a cane, watch out. There is a problem. And so, for me, I think the first and the most important thing for us to do as ECOWAS member states is to call for a review and then pull in sanctions.
Who should
Anybody,
who should activate?
any member activates, and that's the law, the ECOWAS treaty. Any member can activate that, provided you give such notice, and ECOWAS will carry that.
Is this also an indication of what to expect from the African Continental Free Trade
Beautiful.
Agreement?
This is where we are heading to, and that's why, for me, the first time I saw that the border was closed, Nigeria signed Mr. President signed the AFCFTA on the 7th of July in Niamey. See how these things are working in Niamey, in Nigeria Republic, and the whole world was clapping. Everybody was jubilating that Nigeria has come. From 7th of July, the next thing we had was on the 20th of August, Nigeria closed the border. And people were criticizing. And I said, no, don't get us wrong. We are only preparing for the implementation of the AFCFTA because we do not want it business as usual any longer. Now, what Nigeria has done is critically come up with what we call in trade, carrot and stick. We have been giving carrots for a long time, but now, hey, gentlemen, it's time for stick.
Okay, finally, just give us an idea of what is the negotiation context. You said ECOWAS has come up with a solution. So
yes.
Where are we
like
headed?
I said, the three-man panel went through the countries. And of course, we are going to Togo, Ghana, Burkina Faso, and Cote d'Ivoire now to also sample the opinions. And then, day before yesterday, on the sidelines of the ECOWAS Heads of States meeting in Niamey, the Heads of State approved our report, and also approved that the task force, the panel will now bring the three countries together on table. It is no longer their bilateral agreement. It is now going to be ECOWAS, and then pushing this and say, look, my friend, you got it wrong. You did it wrong. You get it. And once that is applied, all the parties will now sign a fresh agreement to say we will keep to this, and this.
But still, there's still a need for the review of the...
That comes later.
Later.
Yes.
Your final word, very shortly, in less than 60 seconds, Prof.
Yes. I believe...
Do you think that the border should remain permanently closed?
If it will continue to promote our growth and development as a nation, we cannot chicken out or reduce ourselves to Father Christmas forever for other nations or neighboring countries living as underdeveloped, suffering with the challenges of insecurity, smuggling of drugs, arms, and keeping our lives in danger, and also putting the Nigerian nation in a blink or in a life that is not predictable. We can't continue like that. If the closure of the border will promote our security, it will promote our economic advancement, it will lead to our unity and prosperity and the integrity of our position as the giant of Africa, because we can't continue to be giant of Africa and suffering the challenges of economic underdevelopment, political disarray, and other issues of insecurity we are going through, especially the Boko Haram challenges. It cannot continue like that.
All right.
Yeah.
Professor Degachi Eliumambe, Professor of Sociology Department of, Professor of Sociology, University of Abuja. I'd like to thank you very much. And he's also a criminologist, expert in terrorism and insurgency. Thank you very much for joining me. Dr. Ken Ukoha. Thank you.
Thank you.
And what should I say? I wish you luck in trying to bring peace and getting all ECOWAS members back to the drawing table.
Thank you
for your presence.
I appreciate it.
All right, that's late edition this week. We've looked at the border closure within the context of ECOWAS and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. That's late edition for this week. Bye-bye.